we would gather around and they would have just this soda can that was wrapped in construction paper that had whoop ass on it. And they would open up the can in front of the huddle, and everyone would get so fired up and go crazy. And we'd like go out and win, open up a can of whoop ass. I mean, look, everyone has different styles, but language used that really restricts players' exploration and creativity is, to use your term, like killing that flower. And, I just want to be someone who continues to learn and evolve and does exciting things, but also is happy because it's all very process oriented. And if I don't get there, I'm still going to be happy with what I've built and who I've met along the way.
A first class individual. Welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Glicini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss and explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode 70. My guest is Deemer Class, a Duke University graduate, a two-time national champion, a three-time All-American, a former pro lacrosse player, a motivating mentor, and a committed coach of the sport. After playing at the highest level, he took a leap of faith, leaving a traditional career path to launch First Class Lacrosse, an elite player development company that now impacts athletes all over the nation. From youth lacrosse to the biggest names, programs, and teams in the country, Deemer is held in such high esteem. As a teammate turned friend and affiliate partner, I admire Deemer's character and a desire to impact. If you are a parent, a coach, or an athlete striving, you'll want to stick around for this one. Deemer, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark, and thanks for the gracious welcome. It means a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean every word. And where I want to start with you is, from my understanding, ever since I was growing up in academics and then sport, some can play it, others can teach it. You can do both. How have you been able to seamlessly go from playing to coaching and then creating such an awesome community?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think at the end of the day, I think as a player, I was always pretty analytical, and I was certainly curious about how to improve. And I think I really dug into how to improve as a shooter and an offensive player, just given my position and what I was starting to gravitate towards on the field and my roles. And I think that really started to translate into what was a found love for coaching. I started in college working camps, giving lessons. I was really committed to my own development. And I remember when I was just really trying to assess, leaving and making that leap of faith, like you mentioned, from a finance job to coaching and playing full time, the idea of player development was something I had been really passionate about because of the impact it had on my career. And so I think that really just launched me into the realm of trying to improve as a coach. And from my early days, understanding that just because I was a good player wasn't going to just mean I was a good coach. I knew I had to work at it and improve, and I was ready to do that.
I will say, the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about digging in and player development, I think it's not always easy to have that translation, right? I think the reason why I brought this up is, yes, you have that analytical mind, but being able to communicate it in a way that it gets absorbed. I think a lot of times your pain becomes your purpose. If you can't figure something out and then you figure it out yourself, you're then able to teach it. Is that in line with what you were talking about, being analytical, that you were kind of trying to figure it out on your own, and then once you got it, you wanted to share that idea? Or is that off?
No, I think that's accurate. I would just add that I had a few really impactful coaches that were in my corner helping me to figure it out. And I think that combination and that process was really motivating and exciting for me. Like, I do think I fell in love with the process. And I was actually watching one of the new, like, Team USA slash like basketball Olympics documentaries on Netflix and hearing guys like, Kevin Durant and Wemby and some of these guys talk about them falling in love with basketball and the process. I think that just kept growing for me. And I was just lucky to find coaches and mentors that through high school, college, and post college, that passion and love kept growing. And even when I knew my playing career was coming to a close, I was so excited about what was next from a development and coaching side and continuing to find my place in the game.
I think you and I are birds of a feather there. So let's go on the thread of great coaches that poured into you. Whoever really comes to mind, and however early you wanna go in your life. But who were some of those early coaches or mentors that right from the jump you had this care about sport, but then they made you believe in yourself and start to really love the sport?
I would go all the way back, and there's so many. And when I look at maybe other people I've come across, I do take time to reflect that, not everyone's as lucky, to have great coaching situations. And something that when I think about the impacts I had and the experiences and, playing football, basketball, lacrosse, from rec to club to everything, it was, really special. I think of a guy, one of my best friends, TJ Neubauer, played at Fairfield. His dad, Tom, was a baseball player at McDonough High School, and I think he played collegiately at Bucknell, but baseball. Didn't know much about lacrosse, but the way he inspired us to just go out there and try to kick ass and get ground balls and be gritty. It was I remember, and it was him and some other coaches at St. James Academy, like rec council. We were in this whether it was a tournament called Lax Splash or even some of our regular season games, like Coach Bryant and Tom and these other coaches, like we would gather around and they would have just this soda can that was wrapped in construction paper that had whoop ass on it. And they would open up the can in front of the huddle and everyone would get so fired up and go crazy and we would like go out and win. And so we would go and open up a can of whoop ass, and it was like those memories just made sports so much fun.
What a great story. And, the root of inspiration means to breathe life into. And I just love that there wasn't any technical knowledge on the lacrosse front, but there was this energy and charisma. There's a saying that it's hard to tell what makes somebody intelligent, but you could spot stupid a mile away. So now that you've been able to see coaches, rather than talk about what they all have in common if they were great, what are some things that you're seeing in the landscape of lacrosse, nationwide, that some of these coaches are doing to really kill the flower? Maybe they're not growing and nurturing the player to the best of their ability. Is there one, two, three things that come to mind that some of these coaches should be refraining from doing?
I mean, look, everyone has different styles, so I don't want to sit here and kind of point to, hey, this is wrong or this doesn't work. But I will say that, language used that really restricts players' exploration and creativity, I think is, to use your term, like killing that flower. I think players at a young age are very impressionable. And while I think there's a lot of room for holding them accountable and pushing them, I think there's also room to understand where a coach fits in someone's timeline of development. Is it 7, 8 rec and youth lacrosse? Is it middle school? Is it high school? And along the way, like you have this real opportunity as a coach to inspire and grow their love for the game, and encourage them to push boundaries and grow. And so I think like, the big thing is, in those lines, if you're doing stuff that takes away from that and kills that, and restricts and kind of says like, hey, you can't do this, never do this. Well, I think that's killing it. I think that's restricting players because at the end of the day, who is to say that a kid can't become the next Pat Spencer, Mikey Powell, the next Kevin Durant, that whoever it may be, like you just never know how players are going to grow and develop. So, why can't they shoot like Charlotte North, or, take uh take shots from different angles. So I think that's something that's really continued to grow on me. And I'm not saying that that's easy to do because it's hard to live that as a coach as well when you're trying to win games, you're trying to play everyone on the team depending on what level you are. There's a lot of challenges that go along with that, which makes coaching very difficult.
This episode is brought to you by Whoop. For the last several years, I have not taken this off my wrist. Okay, maybe I have, but it was just to change the colors. I truly trust Whoop. It's a wearable that lets me know about my resting heart rate variability, respiratory rate, and so much more. I wake up in either the green, yellow, or red, and I know if I should prioritize training and working out harder or I need to prioritize recovery. I was always looking for ways to optimize and take my performance and training to the next level. Whoops helped me do that. If you're looking to get started, here's a free wristband and a free first month. And if you don't like it, you can return it at no cost. All you have to do is go to the following: join.whoop.com/MGPP. That's join.whoop.com/MGPP. Mark Glicini Peak Performance, my clients, I trust Whoop. You should too. Enjoy. Let me know how you get on. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, I want to come back to this main idea about coaching being difficult and the language used. But you brought up Durant twice, and I just saw a short clip about him, and he was talking about on his come up, he would not finish practice, but then he would go find random parks to play against people with different sizes and just try out different things all the time. He would sometimes play 3, 4, 5 pickup games in a day after practice, and he was just always looking to evolve his game. So I just love the fact that you brought up Durant twice. But the thing that I really circled on my page was language that restricts. This is really huge in mental performance, that you can come from a place that's very criticism, withering, tight, tense, and tentative, anxious, closed off, survival mode. Or if you start to breathe life into yourself from a great uplifting self-talk, you start to open up, you become more curious, you become more mindful, you become more striving and thriving oriented. And those are kind of two different worlds you can live in based on your communication. Now I'm going to turn this over to a question, but one of the first things I want to say is the word therapy gets a bad rap, but the way I wish I heard it described and I'd like to share is that it's support plus rapport plus insight. So you have therapy going on all the time with great coaching, support, and rapport. And then the final thought I want to say before giving you the microphone is I'm still chewing on this idea. Is someone said there's no such thing as tough love, because if it's love, it's not tough, and if it's tough, it's not love. And I was like, wow, that's profound. Let me think about that for a second. And how that resonated with me is if the coach ever built the support and rapport with me, Deemer, then I was willing to do a lot for that coach, right? I didn't feel like it was tough, right? So I want you to go on that kind of thread in the relationships that you have with your athletes, with your fellow coaches. And now I see you have this podcast with all these different coaches in different places all over the country. Deemer, you do such a great job of building these relationships. So I would point to, how do you build that support and rapport with all these different ages and levels?
It's a great question. And I will, again, the two guys that were later in my years, high school and college, that I, always give a lot of credit to are Tori Casemeyer, who I've spent a lot of time, training and really learning to shoot, and trained a lot with Ryan Brown, and then Coach Ron Caputo at Duke, who coached me on the offensive side of the ball for 4 years. And I just knew like these guys really cared deep down. They built those relationships, and they weren't yeller, screamer, like in my face guys, and I think they knew me well enough to know how hard I was on myself, so and that happened with a lot of coaches growing up. Not everyone um, you know, treated me the same, but I think guys realized, hey, this kid's pretty hard on himself. How can I get through? And so, but those guys again, like they built those relationships, and I always come back to that because I felt like when I build those relationships, you can say things more honestly and know that it's going to be received in a really good way, received in a way that is open-minded and then can help someone grow. And so I just think for me, building relationships on the field, off the field, I think of the word empathy a lot. Like I really do sometimes try to think about where someone's coming from and, what is going into their perspective. And funny enough, I think I learned that a bit in college. I ended up being a sociology major at Duke. And, at the time, I remember my dad was like, what are you going to do with this thing? And it's not finance, it's not business, but what it did end up doing is when I'm getting into coaching, allowed me to learn about people, different backgrounds, upbringings, different points of view, and just be more empathetic and understanding and try to see where people come from. So I think that's just helped me grow my ability to build relationships and connect with people. And, fortunately, it's been a really fun journey as, I've gotten into the women's game more. I've worked to build more relationships there and learn from different people. And now it's, feels like this exciting community that's continuing to build and, just doing our best and my best to, you know, continue nurturing those relationships and spending time with the people that also give it back too, and learning, hey, if there's relationships that feel very one-sided, like it is what it is, that happens, and maybe I just don't need to spend as much time there, and so it's been a fun growth from that perspective.
I think if I was to say the essence of relationships in one word, it would be reciprocity. It would be that kind of like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Empathy being to feel into. So I just love that you brought that up. One of the things I want to do is shift back into you. Deemer, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to make a point on that because it's actually awesome that you say that. My grandfather, who was a coach and a teacher himself, we would run football routes in the backyard. He would teach me the button hook and all these things. And he was a basketball coach and player. And sometimes he would write me these notes. And one note that he wrote me was about reciprocity. And
Hmm.
I don't think he kept up with like too many other lessons, quote unquote, but he wrote me about reciprocity. And it's the one that really stands true, like in my mind of like the things that he's taught me. And I think as my view on reciprocity has grown and my view on being grateful and like building relationships, it's also working not to do things just to get it back and lowering
Hmm.
expectations of if I do things for people or I reach out to people, I'm not going to get as upset or worry about if I get it back. But I know that I'll keep like planting the seeds and working towards building a relationship. And then, hey, if that person wants to have it back, like the hope or the optimism is that that grows, and if I were to operate from too transactional of a mindset, I think one, you're going to be left disappointed, and two, it's not going to feel like a true organic relationship. And so that's where it's been this like fun journey, but also up and down because as I mature now, turning 32, like I'm learning, like, well, you're not always going to get it back. So how are you going to handle that?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing in that story. That's just so good because I can bring up the word reciprocity in many different conversations, and people don't have that button hook story with their grandfather. So thank you very much for bringing that up. I will say this. I think the fact that you gave that to me, I think about the difference between finite and infinite game, right? And I think about just playing that really, really, really long game, right? Focused on long-term legacy and a huge long vision, not just winning, the first quarter of life, but really that deep, profound way of looking at it. The psychology that comes in here is one of the best developmental psychologists of all time, named John Piaget, said the point of life is to get invited to the most amount of games. Some you might win, you might lose. If you do that enough times, you'll make it to the playoffs. If you do that enough times, you'll make it to championships. Some that you might win, some that you might lose. But the whole point is to get invited to the most amount of games. And that can be to weddings, that could be to networking events, right? We're not just talking about sport here. And he said the way in which to do that is become excellent at competing and cooperating. Competing and cooperating, right? And we know what this looks like, Deemer, right? When a player is being a ball hog, they're competing too much and not cooperating, right? And when they're not going to the next net enough, they're cooperating too much and not competing enough. So getting that art down is not necessarily an easy thing. So I'll stop there if there's anything that you want to say on that front, or I could turn it into a different question.
I love that idea. I mean, I would say going off that, it's also about, you got to put yourself out there, and it reminds me a lot of, I think it's FDR's quote around the man in the arena. And that was something that hung on our locker room at Duke. And I would remember even from a competition standpoint, I would always and still do even before my events get a lot of performance anxiety.
Mm.
I get, stressed but excited, but like I'm nervous for like the big any competition really. Like I get those butterflies and it's just how I've been wired. But what I would always come back to too is like if you can continue taking the shots, if you can continue to show up to compete or, you know, put yourself out there for that next person or go to that dinner or do this, like again, to your point, like you're getting invited, you're getting in the mix, and then you're able to learn and grow through all those experiences.
And now we're getting into, why I started Mark Glicini Peak Performance and got into mental performance coaching. It was the performance anxiety. It was I had no problem working, but how do you relax, right? And I think one of the things I've come to learn is that you want to be in certain endeavors that you care, but you don't care too much, right? From the soul surfing movie, fear is healthy, panic is deadly. You want to be in endeavors where you really care about what's going on, but just not too much. And the action replaces thought, going back to words that either constrict you or open you up, right? Are you excited for this or are you nervous and anxious about it? Because if you're excited for it, you get those butterflies in your belly to fly in formation. I like how you said there, Dean, that you were wired this way. It was kind of where I wanted to go with the question before reciprocity. And there's a woman named Dr. Ellen Winter, and she had this idea. It was more about genetic endowment that some individuals have a rage to master, right? They just like really want to figure it out. And now I'm going into Deemer being wired that way. You talked about earlier that you've always been hard on yourself. And then right at the top of the hour, you said that you were very analytical. Can you remember when that started? Like, were you always super hard on yourself? Were you always trying to figure it out? Or do you feel like that kind of evolved by the time you got to middle school, high school, and college?
I think going back to even grade school, like I was always a really good student, like pretty much like A's, maybe some B's sprinkled in. And so I think I'm the firstborn in my family. I think just that high achieving mindset, was kind of there. Um, my parents, I always thought like did a good job of like my dad was not always very vocal and like pushing me, but I would see him, you know, in his family business, like wake up at 3 a.m., 2 a.m. every day to go to work and just grind and never complain about it, and it was what he loved to do and still does to this day. And I remember when I would tell people that, they'd be like, "Oh my God, like he's going to work at what time?" Like it's one of the craziest schedules. And so I think I learned a lot from that. But yeah, it evolved. And I remember freshman year, going into freshman year, was the first time my dad had a conversation with me around goal setting. And so we sat down, we set goals for my first year at Loyola. And we had academic goals, which was, I was in honors classes and it was, to get a 4.0. And we had on the field goals, which was make JV football, make JV basketball, make JV lacrosse and start on those. And then I would just start at and that same in that first year, like I just started adding things to those. And he worked with me on the idea of setting them higher than you think. And then if you didn't achieve them, but you still would be happy about maybe what you achieved along the way. And I think that like really lit a fire because I made all three of those teams, which at the time, now like making varsity sports as a freshman becomes the expectation at some of these schools. But in our conference in high school at that time, barely anyone was making varsity as a freshman in any sport. It was very unique. So that making those three JV teams and starting and having a good role in each, like that was really motivating. And I think from there it continued to grow. And then I just kept hiking it up and hiking it up. It was make varsity in all three, and then it built. And I think that for a lot of good, but also probably more anxiety too, just kept like being like this interwoven challenge, but also something that pushed me throughout the rest of my, journey in sports.
Amazing. I absolutely love it. I mean, for some reason, what came to my mind as you were talking is when you go to a new location in the world, you look for a guide. It's like, okay, I've never been to Europe. Can you show me around here? And then our conversation here is kind of revolving around mentors. And I thought about there's certain people in your life that are meant to tour you around, right? Because they've already been, on that journey. And I just love that your dad was like, okay, I've been through high school. This is what you kind of need to do. And then there's a quote inside of setting it super high, but maybe not always getting it. And I'm always encouraging people to do that, right? Realistic, yet really challenging. You can't have it by tomorrow or next month, sort of thing. And the quote is, it's not what you get from it, it's who you become by it. Right. And I think that whole art of becoming and becoming and becoming. And then I just finished a course on child psychology recently. And my favorite idea from it, Deemer, was kids will not always listen to what you say. They will never fail in becoming who you are. Right. So they're always observing. And you watching your dad go 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It's like, got it. Right. Observation, observation, observation. I just love that. Now, you brought up the performance anxiety and anxiousness. You're not you did that on the professional level and found ways to thrive at Duke and different things, and now you're an entrepreneur. And I'm sure there's tremendous amount of stress management that needs to go on. So how are you handling now at this epoch and chapter of your life? How are you handling the anxiousness and the stress that comes with all the hats that you wear?
It's definitely been a growing process. And I do think for now, what I'm doing in an entrepreneurial role, running my own business, trying to grow it, trying to balance personal life, I do really believe a lot of the experiences I've gained along the way as a student athlete have prepared me for it. But I've also matured through it. I've been through ups and downs in business. I've been through ups and downs as a player where I've been able, I just think, to come to a better place on how to stay more even keeled through the ups and the downs and through the ups, like still celebrate and get excited, but also knowing that there's just a lot of work to still be done. So it just kind of almost to a fault sometimes, like I have to really stop myself to make sure, hey, like this is really exciting. This is I'm really grateful for the opportunity to work with so many great players, families, and coaches year after year and do something that I love. Like I have to always work to remind myself that because that is something that's been really special about choosing this path. We can always get caught up in the more work, more events, more ideas. And I think that is also the struggle of being in a more entrepreneurial role is that there's so much options. There's so many options. So how do you learn to be content in that? I think that's always a moving target. But I've, now too, like just kind of going back to my dad, like having more conversations with him on like I've never really seen him get so upset or like raise his voice. Like he's so even. And I'm like, man, like how do you do that? How, and he's got a lot of stoic qualities, and he has a very much like it is what it is, mindset. And so I think, as I've gotten older, I think some of those things I've absorbed a little more to help, manage some of it, and just try to keep perspective. And I think and being grateful around, what we're doing, what I'm doing, it has also helped a lot too.
Remembering your why when you're getting caught up in the what is what I took away there, and gratitude is your strength shield when you're going through all of this, right? Keeping that kind of perspective. When I'm talking to clients who are more intuitive, they think about the future very often. They feel like they have something that they want to do and poke this world and mold it, but they haven't done it yet. And they're seeking that patience and that peace and that equanimous nature in their heart, which just means calm and serene. One of the things I'm talking to them about is anchors and lighthouses, right? So these people live a little bit more chaotic, trying to figure it all out in an oceanic way. I say, what are your anchors? Like, what are your grounded routines that kind of, well, that you do throughout the week just to keep, and then your lighthouses, which you've been pointing to as your dad, right? But I would encourage you to, if there's any others that you're constantly plugging into, I call these people my personal board of advisors, right? Could you talk about your anchors and lighthouses in your own life, like the routines that help you and the people that guide you right now? Because I think an entrepreneur that's listening to this, or somebody who's struggling to kind of find, that steadiness underneath their feet, what would be your answer there, Deemer?
I would say one of my anchors when it comes to, you know, business and like what I'm trying to set out to do has truly been like the core of why our business was built. And it's the coaching, the player relationships and mentorship, and the passion for teaching the game. And I really feel like over 8 years now, since really setting out on this journey, I think the more that I've continued to just focus around that and make decisions around, is this what I believe? Do I think this brings value or is good to do? You know, the more I've done that, the more we've made decisions that have helped what we're doing business wise, but has helped keep me personally anchored in, hey, I'm on the right path. I'm on the right journey here. And I think that's been really important. I think, um, as I've grown too, my anchor has always been my family, just, my parents, my sisters, and, just continuing to keep those relationships and build those relationships. So I've, always have leaned on them, throughout, ups and downs. And my now fiance, and I think now too, like I think about the life that I want to live, and I really try to think like, hey, like, am I doing things that's going to help me get to that life? Or are there things that maybe I need to lose or drop or do less of? And I think keeping those priorities have been like anchors for me for sure.
One of the things that I was talking to my father about just the other day is the power of introspection. Now, you don't want to be too introspective for, I would say, hours to days at a time, because that can lead you down to a spiral. But at least taking time to sit down, reflect, journal, talk to your people, right? Like, what do I want, right? I think when I think of James Clear and Atomic Habits, I love the aspect of him saying, only spend 10 to 20% of your time or less on your goals, and then get back to process and habits and all that. However, it might be the most important part of the process, that you sit down and set your mind so that you have the right mindset. Set your mind so that you have the right mindset. I don't think there's enough introspection. And I'll tell you, as a high extroverted individual, right, who's constantly pulled to communicate and this, it's been a challenge and a trial of evolution for me to get quiet, right, and reflective and really say in a very stoic manner, what do I want? Now, you talked about the mission that you're on and why you started it. And one of the things that I want us to go into here, because I think there's a lot that listeners can learn from, is the positives and the challenges that you've had with these players that you're coaching and seeing. So I want to kind of leave that more open-ended, and you can take it where you'd like. But what, as you've been doing this for 8 years, what are some of those main positives that you love about what you're doing and with the relationships that you're building with the athletes, and then some of the challenges that you're noticing inside of First Class Lacrosse?
The positives have been, just I think personally, the joy that I feel when I see players that, and this is where it's also interesting, not just players that I've trained, but even just say it's like a kid I've gotten to know, a kid I've gotten to know through another coach or, someone that I've heard, puts in a lot of work or really cares. I think that that secondhand, excitement and joy, seeing these players have success or reach their goals or go through this journey, that to me is really gratifying. And it's something that, and I actually, I want to find the word for it, but I got a word about it from John Hess too, where it was just, just the idea of this joy that you feel when others are, having success, basically.
Is it to Burge, to bask in reflective glory?
What let me pull it up here because it's just I just thought it was a great term and I was like, wow, this really has summed up a lot of like what I'm feeling.
Mudita. Mudita.
Yes, mudita.
Yeah. So happiness, my happiness is your happiness. Well, the whole core of this, of basking in reflective glory and mudita is this is really cool to understand, right? Because rather than be zero sum, like any success that they have, I'm very comparative, leading from ego, which is his main prerogative is to be right, right? It's hard to do at first, but then it becomes more of something that you rep out as you notice them becoming successful and winning, and you celebrate their winning. You increase the probability of your own winning, which is really cool, right? Because we're energy based creatures, right? And there's a lot of attraction. And what kind of energy are you giving off? Is it very comparative and judgmental and zero sum, or is it synergistic, right, and uplifting? So I'll give you the microphone there.
Yeah, and that's evolved for me too. I think as an athlete and a younger athlete, I definitely was in that comparison competitive mode, trying to get to the next levels and get recruited. And I can't say like I'm always sitting here proud of that, but that's part of my journey, and I think as I've grown and evolved and have gotten into this profession and more coaching that Mudita has grown in that positive direction, and so that's been really cool. And I think I've been able to apply that to other areas, and other relationships. And so that's been a huge positive to this. And, getting to be a small part, a big part, whatever part, a parent, player, or team feels that I or my team has played in their journey, that's everything, and, whether you get a massive thank you or a, invite to a senior day or a note or no thank you at all, I've learned to just be like, hey, like getting to be some part of this, has been really rewarding and building those relationships and, some of the parents I've gotten to know and the kids, it's really cool. And I'm excited for what's to come because some of the first kids I started coaching are just now graduating college a year or two out. So more of those kids are coming back to work our camps and it's really starting to come full circle. And now I'm just like, wow, I wonder what this is going to be like in 10, 20, or 40 years. And so that gets me really excited too.
Well, I think the one thing that I would say on the ego part is, you always do want to have that competitive fire. I think a reason why I love the psychological aspect is because it's not binary. It's not just this or just that. It's a blend of both, right? Like I was talking about with the compete and cooperate. There's a cool TED talk about what motivates human behavior. And those three things are social comparison, immediate rewards, and progress monitoring. And in your answer right there, you actually talked about all of them, right? You can't not be comparative, but I think the best comparison is to your prior self and constantly stay on that journey of getting better holistically yourself. And then the immediate rewards of you getting the text or the invite to the senior day, like, wow, wow. And you're getting that dopamine kick, but you also feel purpose in what you're doing, right? It's not like you're, in a desert by yourself. And then that last one is the progress monitoring. Like, where am I comparatively? Bringing back the introspection. Now, I do want to get to the other side of it, right? So you're talking about the positive aspects, but let's get into whether you want to talk about as the challenges with these relationships and first class lacrosse, or misconceptions that maybe you believed when you were first starting out, but you now notice are less important. So you can take it however you'd like here, but let's get into the negatives or challenges that you've noticed and learned from.
I think one of the challenges, and again, like you were kind enough to share some praise around the relationship piece, but I also view that as a major challenge in general
Mm,
because when I think about, some of my relationships, the or that I've gained through some of my coaches, they've been in different venues, right? I had some of my rec coaches who, one of them is his son's still my best friend, so I'm still very connected to. Um, my high school coaches, I've stayed in touch and that's been awesome. My mentor Tori, we talk a couple times a month probably. And you know, Coach Caputo, I was with every day at Duke, and the rest of the staff. So like my point is you have these varying levels of interaction, like face-to-face interaction. And I've noticed that in, my coaching and training, sometimes it's, working with a team a couple times throughout the year, or we might do a 10-week, once a week program, with in a certain location, 1 hour a week. We've done events where kids come for 2 days and there's this great connection, and we stay close, or come 2 days and there's never any connectivity after that. So maybe what I'm saying is, and then even coaching USC, St. Paul's, like McDonough, then I'm with the kids every day for that spring season. So I've just had a lot of range of interaction. And so I think trying to keep those relationships strong and genuine, or even just keep them going, is the challenge. And, you know, I do believe it takes some two-way back and forth. Like I can check in a bunch, but if I'm ever never getting a text back too, like it's hard. And as someone who really values the relationships, I think that's something that is always, just top of mind. Like, having those check-ins and those touch points, trying not to feel like I'm getting too busy to do some of my reach out, or check in with people. But then, again, like, and I'm not trying to blame anyone. Like if it never comes back the other way, well, then you're just left to, if I didn't check in, then there's starting to fade away and dissipate. And so I just, and then I think mentally, always wondering, well, what does that mean? Does that mean we don't have a good relationship? Or was that just great for the time and place that it
mm.
was as a part of the journey along the way? So, I guess I also get pretty sentimental about it, which is probably not a bad thing, but it's just probably again is what kind of makes me me in some of this journey from a coaching perspective.
And I already said it a couple times here, but it depends on the situation and the context. And the book I have right here, that I'm rereading, Good to Great, all about level five leadership and the idea that every company has a hedgehog concept, and they got to keep doing what they've always done. But at the same time, there's the innovator die side of entrepreneurial endeavors, right? So you kind of need both. You got to be able to swim and figure out, are we staying to our foundational first principles, and at the same time, are we innovating? So it takes kind of both. One of the things that I came across and I made a connection about is in strength and conditioning, they follow the FIT principle, FITT. right? And if you do that, you'll become stronger, more conditioned, higher heart rate variability, etc. And it stands for frequency, intensity, type, and timing, right? So you don't want to do bench press 7 days a week, for example, right? However, I thought it was an amazing relationship principle. What's the frequency in which you're touching, right? What's the intensity? Are you always yelling as a coach at that player, or are you kind of getting to know what's going on as well? Type,
Mhm.
Zoom session, call, email, different types, handwritten letters, right? These different little touch points, right? That go such a long way because you build a bridge of trust so strong it can withstand the weight of the truth. Going back to your idea of honesty, right? When you can really be honest with people in work, in business, on the home front, but especially when you're trying to lead, when you are leading, right? The final one is timing, right? And I take this from Jesse Itzler, and Jesse Itzler was the one who started NetJets. He's got that all day running company. He's
Did that coconut, did you do coconut water too?
exactly. I don't think there's anything. He started his whole career off with speaking or starting the New York Knicks anthem or song, which is pretty amazing. He had a really cool come up. But what's my point? My point is this. He said, if you're a true friend, you do these three C's. And that was compliment, congratulate, and console. And that's like constantly, building, praise, growing, compliment, congratulate. Like, Deemer, that happened for you? Again, mudita, Burging, right there. But I think the most important one, if you ask me, is console. Like he says, when something bad happens to your people, you don't sit around, you show up, whether it's a text or something like that. And I just wanted to share that because I thought, like, whoa, no, this is not just strengthening your body in the weight room. I think the fit principle goes a long way in communication and relationships.
I
Anything
like
there
the
before
I like the console aspect of that too, because that's probably the hardest one and the most awkward one in a way. Like, I think the first two, when you see the new LinkedIn promotion or you see the success on the field, whatever it may be, it's also usually the most visible. So it is also that I think probably the easiest if you care enough to send a text, leave a voicemail, shoot an email, and do those first two things, compliment, congratulate. Console, I think when people need it most is also probably when th're most isolated, right? And they're
mm,
at some of their lowest points, and either people don't know about it because they're afraid to tell people about it or keep quiet about it, or it's just also the least visible, so that's where like you only will know that if you are checking in or going through some of that, because not many people want to just go around and tell everyone in their phone contacts list that they're going through a hard time. So it's a great reminder too, where even seeing some people go through some tough times, everyone's like wondering, well, should they reach out? Well, then a lot of people probably aren't reaching out, and that person's not being supported like maybe they could be.
yeah, I mean, action cures fear, right? So, like, you have that thought about it, just send it downrange, right? Send a text, right? Reach out. I think that's my encouragement from this conversation we're having. I had Dr. Jerry Lynch on my podcast really recently. 125 championship teams. He's just a titan in sports psychology and spiritual coaching, if you will. And one of the things that he's writing about right now, he's about to release the book, is the opposite of fear is love, and how we love is to connect, right? And I think that's what we want, right? And we can connect with ourselves and become more confident as an athlete or a performer, and then we do that for our people as well. So how I dovetail the fear side of this is, Deemer, coming out of Duke, you could have done a lot of things, right? And then you could have stayed in finance. My question to you is: there's probably people that point to you and say, "Wow, that was courageous, Deemer," and I define courageous as do it afraid, and it was, right? There's probably you're problem solving every day, if you will, right? Because you're creating your own schedule and you're creating the next, thing that we're after. Goal setting starting with your dad in high school, and now that's still happening on the company front. So, could you share how you're dealing with that fear, or how you're dealing with that constant I don't know or uncertainty, yet maintaining faith and maintaining ground and building a company like you are?
Starting with the goal setting in high school, I've had this evolving vision of what success looks like. And being someone that I would say is, again, high achieving and pretty self-motivated, like I'm definitely a self-starter. As my vision of success has evolved, what I want to do and get to continues to evolve. And so in high school, my vision of success was, captaining a, you know, championship lacrosse team, being an All-American along the way in high school and college, and being the best player on the field possible. Like that was my vision of success. And then as it's grown, it's just continued to push in different directions. And I think making that leap from finance to what I'm doing now, it was probably the fear of, giving up the job and the guaranteed money and whatever it was. Uh, the fear of that was not as great as the fear of not reaching what I thought my potential would be, or not reaching what my grander, visions of success and having a successful lifestyle and a family and something that creating something that I was really proud of. So it looking back, it wasn't that hard of a decision because I thought there was more out there. And so I think that, now I'm constantly just assessing, well, not what's next, but how is my vision of success and what I'm setting out to do, how is it going to continue to grow and evolve? And I think that just it keeps coming from learning and having conversations with people and staying up to date on industry and markets and just trying to, keep learning. And, I just want to be someone who continues to learn and evolve and does exciting things, but also is happy because it's all very process oriented. And if I don't get there, I'm still going to be happy with what I've built and who I've met along the way.
This episode is brought to you by Thorne Health Tech. Which company do you trust when it comes to your health? Thorne Health Tech provides over 190 supplements and products necessary to avoid deficiencies and optimize mental acuity, holistic health, speed, strength, and conditioning. For years, I've taken their amino complex, whey protein, and elite multi AM and PM vitamins. I'm proud to represent Thorne. Why? Because their quality of products is the highest, as well as purity and potency of every supplement. They're backed by the Mayo Clinic. The raw materials that go into the supplements are NSF certified for sport, as well as tested and retested to meet Olympic standards. So if you're looking to optimize your performance and get to the next level, whether it's to meet your protein thresholds or just optimize holistically, trust Thorne. To get started, enter your email and enjoy 25% off at thorne.com/you/Mark Glicini. That's thorne.com/you/Mark Glicini. Enjoy. Now, back to the episode. There was a cool article that came out recently in about the top 15 or 20 most likable PGA Tour golfers of all time. Likable is how they were. And the thing that was the through line was humility, which was interesting, right? Why were they? And humility, which I can't stop talking about this definition of it, is what you do not yet know is more important than what you do know. And that's what I heard you say, Deemer. Like, I can't wait to learn. I can't wait to see what happens here next. And then to the first part of your answer there, what I take away is the fear of inaction. That's got to be a driver more often, right? The fear of inaction. Like, I love how you were comparing the magnitude of fears, like staying in finance versus not doing your dream and your potential there. So my next question will be a
Mark,
little bit of go ahead.
I would say just one thing that kind of struck me there that you were saying, you know, I've been fortunate to keep meeting some really successful people, and that humility concept has come up a lot in, I would say, how I would define like interactions where, you know, some of these people are asking way more questions than they're talking.
Mhm.
which to me is a sign of that humility, but also that curiosity. And, you know, two, like, don't need to be like the loudest person in the room. And, those things have kind of struck with me and made me just think that, you know, if and when I get to wherever I'm going, that would be how I would want to be described and characterized as. So I think that's certainly shaping some of my actions, I hope, because I that really resonates with me.
If there's a listener who listens to these episodes often, they're going to hear that me say the next thing I've said many times, and that is all cures come from curiosity and a story about Stephen Sondheim. Stephen Sondheim was the greatest musical composer, arguably, of all time. And someone asked Stephen, how do you create such great music? He thought for a second, and he said, I listen. And I thought that was beautiful, right? Just the fact that like these people that create, they invest a lot of time consuming the right material and getting informed so they can get their actions in formation. And I think that all cures do come from that curiosity. It's at the essence of peak performance, this whole mindful, wide gaze, the taking it all in, letting the game slow down, right? That could be on the field, but also letting life slow down, right? By becoming more of a sponge to the right material. To kind of take us home here, Deemer, could you do a little bit of a look back, look forward? So, if you were to go back to your younger self as a younger entrepreneur, or even when you were playing, what's one thing that you kind of know now that you wish you knew back then? And then maybe one or two things that you're really looking forward to as you create and build First Class Lacrosse.
I think when I look back, I think I wish I knew that, I wish I knew that I could try to work to have more trust in things working out, and I think that it would have allowed me to be a little more even keeled and not let the highs and lows like whipsaw my emotions, and I think like I've learned through experience, but if I could have accelerated some of that, I do think it would have been a benefit to more relationships, benefit to more on-field performance, benefit to, you know, just, overall quality of life. So I think that's something that, looking back. And then what was your thing about the go forward?
Yeah, looking forward, one or two things that you're most excited about in building First Class Lacrosse or personally.
The thing I'm most excited about right now from a first class lacrosse perspective is now we're really starting to get to a point where I feel like we can expand our team, expand our community. So, my hope is that we can find, more people like minded and like our current team that want to be a part of, making this wide reaching impact. And there's going to be challenges along the way with that. And it's not easy, but that's something I'm really excited for because, I do think at the end of the day, I could always do this forever myself. But I think even you mentioned the word once today, legacy and things like that. Like I think about that a lot. So I would love and am looking forward to trying to build that team, to build that community. And we're going to keep listening along the way to what people need to try to be there to serve, and be there to provide information and value and support to help people be the best they can be on and off the field. Really. So, and connect them with great people like yourself, if that's something that, hey, like they're needing, and we've tried to surround ourselves, even as a business, with, other great businesses and programs and services that really, you know, provide, everything to help them, get to where they want to go.
Certainly, a rising tide lifts all boats. Deemer, is there anything that you wish I asked you, or wish that we talked about here that but we didn't?
I don't think so. This was awesome. I mean, I wrote a few notes down, and it's also really cool to hear some of the things I've been feeling, and then hear that you're either talking about them or you reference some different, studies and talks and books and people that are digging into the psychology of this as well as yourself. And so I think it is fascinating, because it also provides some cool affirmation, when you're moving in the right direction, and it's a good reminder to keep going and keep pushing. So I thought this was awesome, and I really appreciate you having me on.
All right, awesome. I got one more for you. Okay, we're gonna start with you inside the crease. We're in overtime here, and we're gonna have you mumble off. We're gonna hit you on the backside, so you better stick this one. My last question to you would be how you define greatness, right? Two national championships. You had an illustrious career at the pro level. You've been around this game a very long time. You look at all these different players throughout the entire country. You're talking to the world's best coaches. So, however you would put words to that, how do you define greatness? What does it look like to you?
The some of the things that come to mind right away in terms of greatness are ultra compete and compete levels. That just is tried and true. The Some of the best guys I've played with are just the ultimate competitors and guys that have no fear. They take chances, they're aggressive, they step up when their team needs them, they don't back down. Those are, huge. And I think, lastly, I think some of the greatest guys, are some of the best teammates. And when I say best teammate, it doesn't mean that always they were so liked or loved, but they were the most respected, for their dedication and work ethic. And they would hold people accountable, and had that drive. Those are things that I think really stand out to me. And maybe the last piece of that would be resiliency, kind of like tying into that no fear. Like they get knocked down, they're getting right back up, they're not questioning themselves, or if they are, it's short-lived, and they're coming back swinging, so those things come to mind when I think of greatness, whether it's in sports or um, you know business or other people, taking chances on things.
Leaders disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. I just wrote in my blog intentionally that got a lot of uh, well reception. It took me a few years to come up with this short idea, but it's really powerful to me at least. And that's the difference between strength and resilience. And strength is how much weight you can carry. Resiliency is how much weight you can put down. And I think when you're looking to become a more flexible, durable, reliable, mentally strong athlete, performer, entrepreneur, parent, leader, you have to learn what you can put down, right? And not just carry weight with you with resistance on your heart, but a free mind comes from a relaxed heart. So putting that down and becoming more resilient. Deemer, thank you so much. Guess the last thing I would say is where should listeners go to learn more about FCL, the platform, and what you're working on?
Yeah, I Google, Twitter. If you look up First Class Lacrosse, it should pop up. We also recently started a podcast. So, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you can look up First Class Lacrosse there. And I think that's your starting point.
Thanks, Deemer. I appreciate our relationship. I know I could say that publicly as well as privately, but thank you so much for being a partner, a teammate, a friend in my life, and I'm cheering you on, first class across and beyond.
Thanks, Mark. Likewise, wishing you the best. Excited to be in touch, and thanks again for including me.